Imagine picking up a 5-pound block of iron, placing it on a stove or open fire, and then dragging it across your linens to smooth the creases out of your Sunday best. For many generations, this wasn't a quirky antique at a flea market, it was household life. Here's how one of the most unglamorous of domestic tools became a symbol of home, industry, fashion, and change. Welcome to Retro Treasure Unearthed, and today we're diving deep into the world of vintage clothes irons, their origins, their rise, their cultural impact, and what they tell us about home, work, and technology. From the earliest heated stones used in ancient times to steam-driven electric irons in the mid-20th century, the humble iron carried more than wrinkles, it carried the story of labor, gender roles, industrial design, and domestic fashion. In this video we'll travel that timeline, linger in the golden age of irons, pause for the nostalgic memories of pressing fresh shirts and crisp linens, then explore the decline of the heavy iron and the rise of convenience, all wrapped up in a reflection on what it means to hold a tool of the past. So sit back, and maybe fetch a cold drink, as we uncover the treasure of vintage irons. Early origins. Ironing as a practice goes back well over 2 millennia. In one of the fascinating early mentions, there are records of ancient China using pans filled with hot coals or heated sand to smooth fabric. These early techniques were often more about sanitation, heat-removing lice or bacteria, than purely about decorum. In medieval Europe and beyond, flat pieces of metal, or even heated stones, were pressed against fabrics. Over time, by the 17th and 18th centuries, blacksmiths cast flat irons, or sad irons, in one piece of heavy iron. The term sad iron comes from sad, meaning solid or heavy in Old English. These early irons were heated on the stove, near the hearth, or on a dedicated trivet. They got hot, they cooled quickly, and ironing was more of a labor-intensive process than we imagine today. The golden age of cast and box irons. By the 19th century, household irons took on more defined forms. The cast iron flat or sad irons became common in Europe and North America. They weighed somewhere between 5 to 7 pounds typically and were heated on wood or coal-fired stoves. At the same time, innovations appeared, hollow box irons, or charcoal irons, that held a hot slug or embers inside to keep the soul hotter longer. Collectors' guides highlight this era. American country irons flourished from 1850 to 1950. The most common early irons were cast in one piece and weighed from 5 to 7 pounds. Interestingly, one inventor who changed the home ironing game was Mary Florence Potts, 1850 to 1922. She patented a detachable wooden handle iron in 1871, allowing multiple hot iron bodies to be swapped in and the handle stayed cool to the user's touch. These irons also reflect the growing industrial era, mass casting, standardization, design features improving. It wasn't just function but also presentation. Some irons became decorative, including floral patterns or polished surfaces. Design innovation and cultural impact. As we move into the late 19th and early 20th century, the iron evolves not just in mechanics but in cultural presence. The home laundry room becomes a symbol of domestic order. The iron becomes a tool of not just fabric smoothing, but of societal norms. In the Victorian and Edwardian eras, freshly pressed linen, starched collars, crisp tablecloths, they were a sign of respectability. Owning and using a proper iron signal that you cared about presentation and household discipline. Meanwhile, manufacturers were racing to make ironing easier and faster. The boxed and charcoal-fueled irons helped, but then came heated discussions of steam, electricity, detachable handles, temperature control. One collector document notes, "The history of pressing irons is closely related to the history of fashion, produced throughout time in response to the need to press the specific styles of clothes that were in fashion at any particular time." The cultural imprint is interesting. Laundries in immigrant communities, for example, often used heavy irons day in and day out, as part of their income. The image of the laundry woman, the ironing board stretching across the kitchen table, the smell of starch and steam, all these are snapshots of a world now largely gone. Electric and steam irons, mass market revolution. The next big shift, electricity and steam. According to museum and heritage sources, in 1882 an electric flat iron was patented in New York City. By the early 1900s, electric resistance models were appearing, and by the 1930s and 40s the steam iron became viable. This period saw not just functionality but design flourish: sleek handles, enamel finishes, integrated temperature dials. The iron moved from being merely a heavy tool to a household appliance reflecting modernity. People began referring to "make life easy" irons, and pushing the notion of ironing as part of the modern home. In this era, the cultural impact really peaks. The iron is no longer just for pressing collars, it's part of the mid-century home, the all-electric kitchen, the suburban laundry, the modern housewife's toolkit. And yes, that phrase is dated, but it reflects the historical context. The visual identity of the iron, chrome, colorful Bakelite handles, product advertising, becomes iconic. Peak and saturation. By the mid-20th century, almost every household in the developed world had some form of electric iron. The heavy cast iron pieces were still around, but for show or secondary use, the market focus shifted to ease, durability, safety. The ironing board evolved, steam reservoirs got larger, fabrics changed, synthetics, blends, wrinkle-free finishes arrived. The iron adapted to the demands of modern clothing and modern life. Culturally, the image of pressing your Sunday dress, or steaming the kids' school uniforms, remains vivid for many people alive today. The iron sits at the crossroads of domestic labor and industrial progress. Let's pause for a moment and lean into nostalgia. Think back, if you have memories of a grandparent's laundry room, maybe you saw the ironing board stretched across the kitchen, the smell of starch, the rumble of the laundry machine in the background, and that heavy iron waiting for the next shirt. Maybe you remember the handle getting hot, the steam hiss when the iron touched a clearing on cotton, the crisp sound of linen being smoothed. For many, ironing was more than eliminating wrinkles, it was part of Sunday routine, of family readiness, of uniforms pressed for school, church. If you grew up seeing your mother or grandmother iron, you knew that tool was fundamental to household pride. And for collectors today, the sight of a cast iron, sad iron, is a portal. It evokes the sweat, the effort, the dignity of domestic work. It reminds us how much technology has changed. What once weighed 5 pounds and took minutes of careful use is now a lightweight appliance, plugged in, with steam bursts and non-stick plates. But the memory remains. But of course, every peak shifts. Starting in the later 20th century, several factors contributed to the decline of the heavy iron era. Fabrics changed, wrinkle-free materials, synthetic blends, less starch, reduced the need for heavy presses. Appliances improved, irons got lighter, safer, smarter. Also, lifestyles changed. Laundries became service-based. The concept of ironing everything faded for some households. Off-the-shelf ready-to-wear clothing and more casual dress reduced the centrality of the iron. In short, the vintage heavy iron became more collectible than utilitarian. The story of the iron echoes the story of domestic labor, once central, now much altered. As we wrap up, let's reflect. What does an old iron teach us? It teaches how technological innovation changes everyday life. It shows how something as mundane as smoothing wrinkles is deeply tied to gender, labor, material culture, design, and home. It reminds us of the ordinary becoming extraordinary through a historical lens. Next time you plug in your iron, maybe pause and imagine the woman in 1900, lifting a 5-pound block of iron, running it across shirts by hand, relying on fire heat, on skill, on muscle. In that simple act lies a world. Thanks for joining this journey through time with Retro Treasure Unearthed. If you enjoyed this deep dive into vintage irons, please like, share, and subscribe. We've got many more treasures waiting. Until next time, stay curious, stay nostalgic, and keep uncovering the treasures of the past.